Hello, I'm Bruce Zimmerman, and this is the Open Line Garden Show podcast for this week. Now, I've told you about some great hydrangeas, and as the breeding goes on, they're getting better and better and better. Invincible Spirit is probably one of the best ones. The mountain type hydrangeas, the Tiny Tough Stuff and Tough Stuff, are excellent, smaller, more dwarf forms, which are lace cap, but also what they do is they rebloom. So you've got size and reblooming, so they're excellent hydrangeas. But if you remember back in 2004, the original Endless Summer hydrangea came out, and it was a mop head, and what it was a hardy, reblooming hydrangea. And it had the ability to go into full sun, partial shade. It got a height of 3 to 5 feet. It was mildew resistant. It was hardy to zone 4 to 9. And the blooms, depending on the acidity of the soil, were either blue or pink. And, of course, acidic being blue and the pink being the alkaline soil. Now, this mophead type hydrangea became very, very famous because of its hardiness, its reblooming abilities, and many, many people went with this one. And then as the breeding program continued, we got more and more varieties that had similar features in the same Endless Summer style of hydrangeas. Now, the next group that came out was Twist and Shout. Twist and Shout had all the features of the original Endless Summer, except that it was a macrophylla lace cap, and that means it had more of the flat heads with both the sterile and the fertile flowers. So they were flatter, but they had the reblooming ability. They had the color range, in other words, blue in acidic soil, pink in alkaline soil, the mildew resistance, sun and partial shade, hardy to zone 4, and it had a height and a width of 3 to 5 feet. These are really fantastic type of hydrangeas. This is what we're looking for. Hardiness, repeat bloom, size of bloom, and interest, so that you can change the color if you so need to. And it's very important that we're able to put blue into gardens, because blue is one heck of a hard color to get into any garden. So using an acidic soil and modifying it either with garden sulfur or with aluminum sulfate, you'll be able to change these plants into blue from pink. Some of them are white and then change color, and we'll get to that one. Now we'll talk about the following breeding program with Blushing Bride. Now, Blushing Bride is another Endless Summer. It is a macrophylla. It is hardy only to zone 5, so it's not quite as hardy as the others. Height is 3 and width is 3 to 6 feet. The white blooms mature to either the blue or the pink, depending on the acidity or alkalinity of the soil. So you start out with a white hydrangea, which matures either to pink or blue. It's a mop head. It takes sun and shade, and it has the mildew resistance. It's become very, very popular because, one, the name, and of course it is one that changes color. And not only just changes color, but goes from white to either blue or pink. And that makes it a plant that's interesting into the garden. Now, the latest ones to come out is the Bloomstruck. Now, the Bloomstruck are excellent. Now, I've grown Bloomstruck, and I really, really like it. Again, it is a Hydrangea macrophylla, which means it has the big mop heads on it. And Bloomstruck is part of the Endless Summer collection. It is hardy to zone 4, so 4 to 9. The height is 3 to 4 feet, and the width is 4 to 5 feet, so they're a little bigger. The mophead flowers are much larger heads. They do sun and partial shade. They have the mildew resistance, but they also have heat tolerance. And that is good, because that's what usually gets a lot of the hydrangeas. In other words, they've got to have so much moisture in order to compensate against the heat. Now, the stems are red, the leaves are a glossy green, and the flower itself can actually start out almost a greeny white and then mature to the color of the acidity of the soil. So you've got the ruby red stems, the green leaves, sort of a greeny white flower starting, and then matures either to a purple bloom in acidic soil or into a deep pink in the alkaline soil. And it is a deep pink. Mine that I've grown is on the pink shade. So, it's an alkaline soil. I'm on a limestone-based soil. So unless I do a fair amount of work, it's always going to be pink. So these can be mixed and put through, since they have so many things in common that you can actually use the different ones in the Endless Summer series to give you interest into a garden either in full sun or partial shade. Now, what I find interesting is that you'll get flat heads, big heads, you'll get more of the mop head, you'll get changing in color. Most of them are about the same size, though I would say that you'll have to bring a couple of them maybe a little bit farther forward. They do take up a fair amount of room, so you're going to have to use them where you can actually give it some room if you're going to do a collection of them. But along a pathway, doing them as a drift, this is excellent. And the fact that they all rebloom. Now, the Bloomstruck actually, in my opinion, reblooms bigger and better than all the others, even in this series. So you can go and you can take these hydrangeas and you can mix them in with annuals and perennials and other shrubs and still have an effective plant. Of course, remember, it's going to be pink or the blue or purple, so you may want to choose that. They're also good for cut flower arrangements, so the Bloomstruck can actually be used in very large containers. You can use them as cut flowers and, of course, mix them in with the perennial borders and shrub borders, etc. So they work very well. Now, here's a little bit of some tips on growing these. And these tips, in most cases, actually sort of go with the other hydrangeas that you may have in your garden. You want to make sure that most of them get morning sun or dappled sun throughout the day, particularly dappled sun in the heat of the afternoon. So, if you can pick that spot, then do that. The soil prep is probably key in this whole collection of hydrangeas. It has to be an extremely high organic soil. The high organic soil is loamy, it's soft, it's very moisture retentive, very high in organic matter, and of course organic matter breaks down, so you're going to have to repeat and maybe mulch in some more in future years. But the soil prep is very important, and the organic matter is key. And you want a lot of organic matter worked in over a wider zone than the actual pot. The reason is, if these are going to be about 3 to 5 feet across, so will their roots. So you want to work in the deep, rich organic soil into a wider hole than necessarily a deeper hole. You'll also find that fertilizing it, you want to use a very slow release fertilizer, usually high in phosphorus in the spring. Don't over fertilize it in through the growing season, because of course you'll push growth instead of flowers and reblooming. So slow release, high phosphorus fertilizer in the spring, and a little bit of fertilizer throughout the growing season. With water, you want to make sure that you're going to always be moist. It's not too wet, not too dry, so you never allow this to dry out. And what will happen is the plant itself will be healthier, stronger, grow better, but it'll also bloom with larger blooms and more of them and over a greater blooming time. So it is important that you do and give it proper watering. With pruning, all of these really are excellent in the fact that you should take off the spent flowers, because it really puts all the energy back into the next bloom. So to encourage new flowers and repeat blooming, do deadhead it. In really cold climates, and I would say pushing it up into the 5 and the 4 zones, I would probably mulch these hydrangeas with about 12 inches of leaves, and I think you'll find that this will allow it to do really well in your garden. In other words, they'll come over winter better and have a better start in the spring. So it's important that you may want to do that. Now, down here in St. Catharines, I have to admit, I don't mulch, other than I've got a pine bark mulch on them, and they seem to do very, very well. So with these, you got to remember that almost all of these will rebloom on new growth, but they will also produce blooms on old growth. So you only take out what is dead, you only take out the spent heads, and that's all the pruning that you really do on these hydrangeas in this endless summer collection. But the one to look for and the one to put into your garden, in my opinion, is the new Bloomstruck. And pick your colors, okay? Because you can go and give it a certain amount of either the alkaline soil, which they normally have, at least in this area, or if you change it to acidic, you can get different tones of blues and purples on your hydrangeas. So, an excellent addition to almost every garden that you could probably plant here in Ontario. I'm Bruce Zimmerman, and this has been the Open Line Garden Show podcast for this week.